This interview, this is actually a really, really wonderful interview because it gives a more scientific and research-based perspective on not even just the spiritual awakenings, but even the Kundalini experiences that people tend to have. So this really kind of gives you a sense of what people undergo when they also take on this path as well. And also some of the misconceptions as well. I mean, Tara really helps you break it down, not just from that scientific research perspective, but also sort of the different philosophies, like such as Tibetan Buddhism as well. So this is a really fantastic interview, really in depth. You're going to really enjoy this. So yeah, take lots of notes. This is a fantastic one. So Tara, thank you so much for joining us. We're so grateful and super appreciative. We love all the different perspectives you bring, and we can't wait for the listeners to actually understand more about, your story and how you got involved in this process. And thank you so much for just being here with us.
Thank you so much, Tara, for being here. And I'm so excited about this interview, and I'm so excited to hear everything that you have to share and share it with the audience as well.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the first question, Tara. We'd love to know kind of what was that transformative event that led you down this path of going into spirituality, even in general, but also the specific like Tibetan and Buddhism philosophies, and also the realm of Kundalini awakening. We'd love to know more about that.
Well, for me, there wasn't really a single transformative experience that kicked it all off. For me, the Kundalini awakening, which, by the way, I call a consciousness expansion, that really started with 17. That was 1977 or something like that. So a very long time ago, where we didn't have the internet. I couldn't Google my symptoms and find out I had a Kundalini awakening. So it was like, I was growing up, and I had very strong changes then, but I obviously didn't register with me that it could be something like that. And I just thought it was, growing up. And then I started with 17 with yoga and with affirmations, and that was all very new then. That wasn't like mainstream like it is basically now. And I bought myself a book from the Hare Krishnas, and I read the whole thing, didn't understand a word. And basically it's been ongoing since then. And I could tell you the whole evening about all these transformative experiences that I've had, because I just had one after the other. And when I was 24 or 25, I was at university in Germany, and then I participated in some bioenergetic therapy, which is quite rough, really. They make you stand in stress position and scream, and so all your body blockages, they're kind of broken open. It's quite brutal, really, to be honest. And then I had another big influx of Kundalini energy, and that really propelled me then to kind of really in earnest to start my spiritual search. And I went to lots of centers, and then I arrived at the Tibetan Buddhist center, and that was very wonderful, and it was very much love at first sight, and I felt I had come home, and that's where I stayed ever since. That's really my spiritual home.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. And Tara, for those of us who don't know what Kundalini is, could you just explain what a Kundalini awakening is and what Kundalini energy specifically is?
Yes, people have this idea that there is like a snake dormant lying at the root of your spine, and then it wakes up and it crawls around in your body, and that's like really frightening and horrible for a lot of people who actually experience that, because it makes it feel that there's some strange force working in them. And it is not like that. I like to see the Kundalini awakening more as a consciousness expansion, quite similar to what we go through when we have puberty, because then we also have a consciousness expansion, and the realms of sexuality and romantic relationships that open up to us. And what opens up in the Kundalini awakening is the world of spirituality and paranormal experiences, and also our unconscious mind opens up, And we can also see the unconscious mind of other people. So where people may be hiding behind a mask, and we can like look more into it, we can feel other people's emotions. So we can, we expand our consciousness into areas that were inaccessible before. Like we might have had small or tiny spiritual experiences that become massive and big, and like visions and true sense of being in union with God, if you want to call it that way, or enlightenment experiences. We have paranormal experience where we think, well, we believed in all this before, but that this really happened to me. That's just like really mind-blowing. Yeah, and then also all the shadow work, all the stuff that is hidden in our unconscious mind, which we thought, oh, I'm a nice person, I don't have these kind of feelings. Yes, you do, all hidden down there, and it all comes to the surface, all the traumas, all the stuff that you have repressed, but also your antisocial impulses that you think, no, I don't want to be like this, you get to see. And so that's what I call really the Kundalini process, or consciousness expansion process. I prefer that term. I only use the word Kundalini because otherwise people wouldn't find me on Google. So that's why I call it that way. But it is something that is also well documented in Tibetan Buddhism, which I'm a part of. And we call it their Tomo, or they call it fierce woman. So they also have a Kundalini tradition. And it is, obviously some people who are very academic, they would argue it's very different than what they call Kundalini in Hinduism, but it isn't truly that different. It's just, the same spiritual awakening that people can have in the Andes, through the ayahuasca ceremonies where they try to awaken that, and in Kundalini yoga in India or in Tibet, or they call it Nei Kung in Taoism. There's also traditions in Africa that speak about that. And so it's known in spiritual traditions around the globe and in history. So, Kundalini yoga doesn't have, the only right to talk about that. It's in many traditions.
And is it different for everyone? Because, there could be some that may have experienced it like very abruptly, right? And then there could be people who may have experienced in doses, almost like a prerequisite. Could you also share about like varying experiences like that people may have?
Yes, again, if you compare it with puberty, it can be very different for different children to go through puberty. For some, it erupts in some amazing first experience, and for others, it really slinks in very, very, very slowly over many, many years. And that can happen in the Kundalini awakening as well. And so this thirst for spirituality, and that this becomes ever more important in our life, that is really the hallmark of it. And then we have some other symptoms like energy movements in the body, paranormal experiences, very much increased emotions, very much increased sensitivity. So these are actually the 5 signs that I use in the Kundalini test that I have developed to diagnose what the Kundalini awakening is. And for some people it comes very abruptly, as you said. For some people it is actually triggered by drugs like cannabis or LSD or ayahuasca. And for the majority of people it comes through, let's say, intensive meditation. Sometimes also another big trigger is to find some sort of soulmate encounter, and particularly it can happen if you don't have sex. So if you're very much in love with this person that you think is your soulmate, but you don't consummate that relationship, that can really trigger that as well.
So it's like having dormant energy. It is like dormant energy, and then somehow it's almost like, it fills up to its lid, and then eventually it just kind of goes off, right?
Well, Ben, if you ask me what does trigger that, what is the reason? I have worked with over 1,000 people, and I am also a researcher in this field, so I very much also look at what have these people in common, what triggers it, and all these things. And what I find is what is really the true trigger for this all is your own desire to expand your consciousness. I've never ever had a client with Kundalini symptoms who did not go to some meditation retreat or read spiritual books or in one way or another try to expand the consciousness. They all did without exception. And so that is really the trigger. So I'm having a view of this whole process that's decidedly not materialistic. So I don't even like to speak about the energy. I see that as a psycho-spiritual process, and which can be very much felt in the body. But we also feel our emotions in our body, and it's the energy body. That's what we're talking about, and not so much the physical body. That's a bit more of a bystander. And so it's not like that there is a true energy lying there sleeping and then suddenly waking up and going up and doing stuff. It's more that our whole energy body, which is where our emotions are stored, and a lot of these emotions are unconscious, all of that wakes up. And so we have a lot going on emotionally and with spiritual experiences that we didn't have before, but we don't have some energy apart from that, which we call that's the Kundalini energy. It's all mixed up with our own experiences of all our own emotions, our own reactions, and sometimes it does feel as if there's an energy. We think, there's like as if there is a snake crawling around. But that's how I work with my clients, that I say, this snake or this energy that you feel really truly is one of your emotions. And if you look at it closely and think, what emotion does it resemble most strongly, then you can find that it might be some repressed anger that you never dare to express, and or some anxiety or something else. Or also bliss feelings, that people, it's not only negative stuff, it's also that people have amazing, most beautiful, orgasmic type bliss going through the entire body in every chakra, and which is indescribable with words. That's how beautiful it is. And all that is also, in a way, lying dormant in us, which in Tibetan Buddhism they call our true nature, and that also wakes up or becomes accessible. And so we get access to all these dimensions that were kind of frozen into ice, like this is how I like to put it, and then the ice is melting, and then it all wakes up and we become very much alive within ourselves.
And Tara, since it is, a consciousness awakening, how come the negative emotions also become much more intense? And what can we do? What are some of the things we can do to help resolve those emotions?
The idea that I have is that we could imagine our mind like an hourglass model like this. Here's our unconscious mind where we have more our negative emotions, the antisocial impulses of aggression and inappropriate sexual urges that's all repressed down there. And up here is the higher consciousness which ordinary people cannot access like this, where we can have true genuine experiences of the divine. And the ordinary person is more like identifies with this small bit there in the middle. And we imagine that up here in the higher consciousness and down there in the unconsciousness, that it's all frozen and numb. We don't have no access to that. And then through this Kundalini process or consciousness expansions, this ice is melting. And it always melts up and down at the same time. So if you are a spiritual inclined person and you go on a meditation retreat, you go and sit in your meditation hall and you go and meditate and you chant and you pray and it's all beautiful. And then you go to bed and suddenly you find so much rage in you and you think, oh, this is so inappropriate. I'm here on a spiritual retreat. I shouldn't be so envious and angry at little things. And you think, what is wrong with me? I'm supposed to be all spiritual. No, it's, you know, you access the beautiful and simultaneously you access the more difficult stuff that you have repressed before. Or if you're more like a psychologically inclined person, then you go on some psychology retreat and you work on your unconscious mind and do shadow work, stuff like that, and go through your childhood experiences, traumas and stuff like that. And then in the afternoon you have some free time, you go for a walk and you look around and you think, I'm in paradise. This is so beautiful. I've never seen in my life such beautiful nature. So your higher consciousness is waking up as well. It's always going up and down at the same time. And then we get this roller coaster of, you know, of being in fantastic, beautiful bliss in the morning, and in the afternoon we are again in some memory of something that was long forgotten, and tears come and so forth. So and it goes up and down, and eventually, you know, I mean, that's then the path to kind of sift through all this unconscious stuff. So in Tibetan Buddhism, we would say we purify our mind, you know, for all the stuff that we have repressed, and repressed for good reason. Either it's too painful or it is too antisocial. So then we bring this up and we liberate it, you know, through you would say laughing about it, to having some humor and say, okay, that's me too, and I have that negative stuff in me as well. Or through forgiveness work, when you have some old grudges and resentments, or you have a lot of anger, then you need to do a lot of loving kindness meditation. So for whatever there is in your unconscious mind, there is various methods that we can use in Tibetan Buddhism, which I teach, and it's called higher consciousness healing. And so for the various problems that can arise, there's various techniques that I offer, and but the baseline is all to do with being more aware, more detached from what you have, and do a lot of loving kindness. And if you're really good at it, you say you have this instantaneous dissolution of your negative emotions. You know, you can just let it arise, and already it's dissolved, and they call it self-liberated. But that's the kind of advanced method where you can do that really quickly.
Is that why you know, Tantra masters like Osho have constantly referenced the link between Tantra and Kundalini, and that a lot of the energy that is raised through Tantra is essentially Kundalini energy, because, you know, it involves, you're not depleting energy in other ways, so it's almost as if the energy is rising up, making it sort of kind of like universal to what you're also saying. I mean, have you also seen sort of links between Tantra as well and Kundalini?
Well, when we look at history, the phase of Tantra happened in between the 8th and the 12th century in India. And that's what was the true historical Tantra phase. And that died down, and there's two branches that survived. And one is the Kundalini Siddha Yoga, which we find in Hindu yoga, Kundalini Yoga. And the other branch that survived is Tibetan Buddhism. And in both these branches, unfortunately, it has been corrupted by a lot of patriarchy. So, because in true Tantra, women are the leaders, you know, women are the teachers for men. Mm-hmm. And obviously patriarchy wants to see it the other way around, and so they'll switch that around again. But nevertheless, the tantric teachings that we have from that time, which was spiritually, I believe, one of the high time on this earth, the teachings have survived, and the teachings have to do with this Kundalini awakening. That and Tantra means weaving it all. Tantra means weaving it all together. So spirituality, sexuality, household life, earning money, all of that, all become one. And it's not like we shut ourselves away in a monastery or in a cave and do our spirituality away from everyday life. So it's not like that. We're not cutting this into pieces, but we weave this all together. And that's where sexuality comes together also with spirituality. So that's not excluded how it is in a lot of, you know, celibate traditions. And yes, so therefore in this historical context, Tantra and Kundalini, are very much connected. It's from that tantric phase that the Kundalini teachings, as we know it, have come to us.
Wow.
Wow. And Tara, what is it? Sometimes the energy becomes so intense, so powerful that you literally your body can't handle it. It's almost like you're having a seizure. What is happening in those cases? Like, how come the energy is so intense sometimes?
So if you think you have like three bodies, one is the physical body, really the flesh. So we're not that interested in that. And then there is what wafts through that body like clouds, and that's our energy body. And in this energy body is all our emotions, our sexual feelings, our nervous energy, that we get frightened and shocked and all of that thing. And then we have even finer energy body, which is more the mental body, where our thoughts are more finer energies, and they're all penetrate. And I have this a lot, that my clients fear that the intense movements in their energy body, which, as I explained before, was like frozen, and now it comes alive and boils and washes around and wafts and makes us shake and and all these things, that they fear. And it can also be very hot and it feels burning, and then they fear it will burn my nerves, or my body will burst, my head will explode. None of that will happen. None. As I said, I've worked with over 1,000 people. I've studied countless literature. Obviously I know they're horror stories, but I don't believe they're true. I think they're just what I've just said. They're horror stories. I had people with intense experiences of these, experiences like burning and so on. And I do send people to the doctors and say, get checked out, have an MRI and whatever, and nobody ever has come back and said, yes, truly, my nerves are, black and burned and so on. No, there is no worries about that. Having said that, I did send my clients to the doctors, and twice people came back and actually had diseases, but that had nothing to do with the Kundalini. That was just found with that doctor visit, So I always, recommend to get checked out by the doctor. If the doctor says, and it's just ordinary doctors, if they say you're fine, you don't need to worry, even if that feels so intense, it cannot harm your physical body.
Mm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and is there also on the flip side? I mean, like if there's also sort of like you're almost experiencing sort of past lives, but also the suffering of past lives, or some sort of an experience where you're just sort of in this almost like another world, and you almost feel weak. You feel like you just want to just drop, like, and then all of a sudden, but after that drop, you feel like you're rejuvenated because you almost like let go. Have you sort of seen experiences like that too, or have people described experiences like that?
Yes. Overall, I mean, you can experience a huge variety of things, and as we said, this is a consciousness expansion, and that in our unconscious mind, we have all the memories from all our past lives. Now, if you believe in it or not, if you don't believe in past lives, you would say strange memories that appear like from other lives. But we don't need to argue about whether reincarnation exists or not. But we do have those memories, stored up in our unconscious mind. And some of my clients do have accessed them. And basically, once you have the Kundalini awakening, if you go and learn a technique to access your past lives, it is not that difficult. There are techniques you can do it. Overall, it's not really that necessary, because all the problems that we have are in the now, and they can also be solved in the now. I'm not so sure what you mean with you dropped and then you feel rejuvenated.
Well, it's the thing is that you, like, you know, for some people, they can't believe what's happening because it's coming so fast and there's so much, and you're feeling such high levels of emotion, negative emotions, things like that. And it's almost like you're resisting them with the mind, right? Like,
Oh, yes.
yeah, because
Yeah.
you're technically trying to resist them, but it's almost as if when you decide to let go, maybe, you know, kind of go to your heart, it's almost like there's a very freeing experience, that it's like, okay, you've decided to just become one with this and surrender to this, and now it's almost like forgetting about it, and something else almost takes over.
Yes, a lot of people are very afraid of this, in particular if they don't have the information. And so then they will resist this naturally and be more afraid, and then they experience more suffering. And if they know what's happening, they can more let go and say, oh, that's interesting, let's have a look at that. Okay, another emotion for clearing comes up. Let's use a technique and, you know, and learn to let it go in whatever way that works for you. I don't recommend to do the opposite of resisting it completely and completely surrender to it, because sometimes people say, oh, just surrender to it, it will all be fine, because that's not necessarily wise, because, I mean, you're dealing with a strong force, you know, with your own unconscious mind, and you don't really just want to dive in and just paddle around in it. You want to have a certain degree of control.
Yeah.
Okay, now we have some time that we allow something to come to the surface, and now we want to have this all calm down because I need to go on my computer and write some emails and be a functioning human being again. So, you know, it is good if you learn techniques to be somewhat in control of this process, even though obviously it has its own force and dynamic, and we need to allow that to happen. But just surrender is not wise, because you're dealing with a huge force of what's happening here, and you don't want to be completely taken over by that. So that is sometimes where people also go wrong and say, okay, I just surrender to this. They find themselves in humongous processes, and you know, as if some weird force is taking over, and that's not what we want. We want to be in control of that, the whole thing. Ideally, this consciousness expansion is going drip, 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 very, very slowly. You know, if you think again of the ice and the glacier that's melting, drip, drip, drip is better than the whole thing coming loose and running down the mountainside and running you over.
Yeah, so how do we find that fine balance between the surrender and the resistance? Or control?
But that's not so easy, you know, you know, that's something that you learn as you go along. And, you know, you basically, one thing that you can learn is to have witness consciousness, so that you learn to observe what's going on and not just be completely swamped up by a wave of massive emotions, and then you just cry and get some sort of hysterical fit or something. You know, you want to learn to have strong emotions, but also be clear and cool and calm at the same time. And that's something that you learn through meditation, basically. That you sit in the posture, you're still as a mountain, and the, you know, turmoil is going through you, and you can observe that, and then you can also apply what we call the antidote. So if you have a lot of rage, you apply loving kindness, and if you have a lot of fear, you apply a sort of letting go, and you know, not be swamped up by this fear and so forth.
It's like our good friend Sonia Choquette, like she says, observe, don't absorb. And does grounding really also help with this too? Like, you know, to actually appreciate the fact that you are having a human experience, that, you know, although, you know, you're a human being, you're also then having these kind of fifth dimensional experiences. Is there, you know, do you also feel like also grounding practices can really help with all of this?
I'm not totally sure what people mean with grounding practices. Do you mean like going barefoot in the grass and going gardening and
things like that? Just even integrating in a way where you don't go into la la land completely, just like you were saying, like there's also the fact that you're embracing balance in your life, like loving your children, like doing even normal things, like even just having that very human experience.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to have some sort of normality, because once the Kundalini has awakened, it's not going to go anywhere. You have to live with that, and you want to be able to hold down a job. You still need to earn your money, and we cannot all live in a hut in the forest. And if the process is very intense, it is good to do normal things, not so much spiritual practice, because more spiritual practice will melt the ice even more. But if you if you have a garden, you do gardening, and you go swimming and walk in nature and cook and eat a lot and stuff like that, that can help to calm this all down. So take it easy for a while. And yes, it is important to balance ordinary human life and these special experiences, because otherwise you move away from ordinary society, and you still have to live in it. We still have to rent a house or get on with our landlord, with our neighbors, or if you have children, we have to deal with the other moms at the school gate and so on. We're still normal people living an ordinary life. We need to earn our money, and for most people that means living in society. I mean, the lucky ones like you or me, we have our self-employed business, but not everybody does.
Wow.
And Tara, is it a consistent practice of taking the energetic blocks that arise, that are rooted in more negative emotions like anger or jealousy or any of those sort of experiences, and basically transmuting them with practices like loving kindness or with your breath? Is it the more we do that, are we clearing up energy and filling it up with higher level emotions?
Yes. I mean, ideally, the idea is that we purify our unconscious mind, and if even though this is a never-ending process, unfortunately, it's not going to very quickly, because remember, this is an hourglass and it's open there, so there's a lot of stuff coming through. In my own life, as I've been in this process for 40 years, it's very, very much slowed down. It's really like you clean it up, and with time it stays more clean, and it stays like that. And also, once you understand how to dissolve anxiety and depression and anger, once you master these emotions, it doesn't matter, all sorts of things might trigger you, but it's always the same negative emotions that arise. And once you know how to deal with those, you just don't manifest them, or you just manifest them so in the seed, and then you can already let them go. And that's a skill. That's learnable, and that's trainable, and that's what I teach people, how to do that. Everybody can learn to dissolve those negative emotions, and that's also what Tibetan Buddhism is teaching us. And it's something that we can get better at it, just like speaking a new language or learning to ski. This is something that can be taught and learned.
And Tara, what's the difference between Kundalini awakening and enlightenment? What is enlightenment, and how do we get there?
So if you imagine enlightenment is on top of the mountain, okay? The Kundalini awakening is like being at the bottom of the mountain and starting the ascent. So, and not everybody wants to get up there. I have to say that as well. Kundalini awakening doesn't mean guaranteed enlightenment. This is sometimes also being said wrongly from some spiritual teacher, because you can very much abuse this power, because it's a bit like money. You can use it for everything. And if you think about charlatans, cult leaders who really are very bad and exploit their disciples, they often have awakened Kundalini as well. They can dazzle their disciples with some magic tricks, and they have fascination power, and make people very dependent on themselves. And yet they're completely corrupt. And so that is a little bit of a warning with this whole process. So, you can use this energy for worse. And that's also why in traditional times, these teachings were never taught to the masses. It was always kept secret. But, you know, things have changed. And now in the West, we are more like open-minded people, and we have more the idea of sharing stuff. But there is this danger there, yes, for sure.
So then, speaking of these, like, you know, what I've also kind of noticed is that, like, you know, there's a lot of receptivity, like, you know, not just the good, but also, like, you know, things that you makes you feel very uncomfortable. Is there a way to also manage, you know, sort of your receptivity as well?
Like, for example, sometimes you can feel other people's emotions.
Or even
Yeah,
other energies as well.
Yes, you become very sensitive in this process, and I think that's one of the most difficult things in the whole process, you know, because all your senses are heightened, you know, what comes into your eyes, you know, the light can easily be too bright, but you can also see amazing, beautiful colors and amazing things. And the same thing is for the ears, and that's a problem because you can get very noise sensitive. But you can also enjoy things like music in a way like you've never enjoyed before. It's like a drug trip just to hear a piece of music. You know, you're just like completely like as if you're taking 5 tablets of ecstasy or something. You know, and but on the flip side, you know, you go into a shopping mall and it's just all too much, and the whole vibrations and all the people running around, and so many people are depressed, and you can feel this negativity. And that's something that takes some getting used to. It's just like as if you are like a computer and you process like whatever 2,000 megabytes, and now you, with the Kundalini awakening, you have to process 50,000 megabytes. And your hard drive maybe is not really wired to have all this, so you struggle with that. But as I said, this is not a good example, because your physical body will not suffer from this. It's only ever your emotions.
Is that why maybe, you know, not being so much in cities might help? Like maybe, you know, like kind of like getting comfortable with this and kind of like a more simple sort of a life first. Is that like, would you recommend that?
I wouldn't exactly recommend that, because some people might hear it and then they say, "Oh, she said I have to move to the country, and I don't want to live in the country." So it's not like all about choice, you know. So, but I will say that a lot of people who are in this process, they seek peace and quiet. But, you know, some also feel quite happy in big cities. You know, it's all about choice. There is no must, and no, you know, you need to give up your urban lifestyle and live like some, you know, people in a wooden hut and, you know, only wear big sandals. And it's not like that. You know, we still can be living our individual life choices, and we can integrate a Kundalini awakening with a lot of lifestyles. So I don't want to get the impression that I say everybody must live in a garden in the country.
And Tara, can this work, for example, if someone has very pure desires, like very loving intent to make a contribution, to help others, you know, at a mass level? Can this sort of work help accelerate that process?
Definitely, because there is this very nice thing. It's called the Seizures, which are the supernatural powers, and they can truly only really awaken through the Kundalini awakening. So supernatural powers, spiritual healing, fascination powers, so that you can attract a lot of followers, that you can make your projects come true, that the law of attraction that everybody talks about, when you have Kundalini, it does really work. You know, you think about something and you put your mind on it, eventually it come into your life. Without Kundalini, it's a bit harder.
Yeah.
So is this where kind of humanity is heading consciousness-wise? We've had a lot of like spiritual teachers really say, and consistently, this is not like, you know, we handpick people that would say this. It's like across the board that, you know, these are very like interesting times, because, you know, one might look at, you know, COVID and and be like, okay, like this is horrible, what's going on. But then there's like, it's like it's like the whole world is sort of going through this process of just cleansing, and it's almost as if everyone is sort of like, not necessarily gently but forcefully sort of coming up, different vibrations to different sort of experiences. It's like these cleansing of emotions are now moving you sort of towards a different frequency, almost a different dimension. Would you say that to be true? Is that something that you feel to be correct as well?
Yes, happening as well. I do this work with Kundalini syndrome. I do it now, I think, 10 years. And, I can just see that every year I have more and more clients. I mean, it might has to do something with my internet presence, but I cannot prove it. But I do. At the beginning, I had a small number of clients, and now I have a colleague, which is my husband. It helps me as well. We are both completely flooded with clients. We have both waiting lists, and it gets more and more each year. And I also believe that we have a collective consciousness expansion, and I just simply see that quite mundanely through the internet, because the whole internet brings all us together and makes so many people, have the ability to they go on YouTube and they say, okay, do this breathing work or do this shadow work. People who would have never done that in the past, when we were younger, you had to go to a workshop, pay a lot of money for it to do this kind of work. Now you go on YouTube, you get shown how to do this. And then young students I have, older people who would have never done this in the past, they're just, okay, let's do that then. And then they get their personal consciousness expansion. But because we also collectively as humankind, we bring all our consciousness together, and so we get accelerated consciousness. And I do also believe that we are at the threshold of some sort of hockey graph, so gradually we get more and more people, and then it just goes up like this. But I don't know exactly where we are on here. I don't know if this will be next year or in 10 years, but I do also believe this is coming, because I do see it in my practice. I can just see it through the kind of number of people who are coming to me, and also the people who buy my books, and people like yourself who invite me to speak on the summits and stuff like that, because all of this gets more and more and more.
It's like a critical mass almost, like, and once there is sort of like this set amount of critical mass, it's almost like the momentum just gets more exponential, right? Yeah,
exactly. But I don't know exactly where we are, if this but I sense that it is coming, and it is accelerating even in these 10 years that I've been working in this field.
Wow. This is incredible.
Yeah.
Like I'm just so like in awe, like in the information you're providing.
I've learned so much. It's amazing.
So if people want to kind of like understand the kind of work that you do and everything even in more detail, how would they go about doing that? I mean, we're already like, I mean, we're on board with you as well. We love everything you're providing. How can someone take more part in what you're doing?
Yes, so obviously I have my websites, taraspringer.com, kundalinisymptoms.com, and I've written a number of books. One of them is this year, which is the very newest. It's called Kundalini. Healing Kundalini Symptoms. I don't know what my own book is called. So it's called Healing Kundalini Symptoms, Proven Techniques That Really Work. And a lot of the things that I've said are written in here in a lot of detail. So this is a book with many words in there, not just one with a few words on empty pages. And here's all the summary of the work that I've done with, as I said, over 1,000 clients, that I've summarized what works for people. And I've honed these techniques, and I know their work. And I've also written another book about Kundalini, and it's called Enlightenment Through the Path of Kundalini. And so all of this is available through my websites or on Amazon, and also in bookshops. And I also have a YouTube channel. People can find me there. I say a lot of things about Kundalini problems and also other problems. So this is how people can take that further.
Oh wow!
Beautiful.
We're gonna make sure that we have that information right here with the
links. We're going to
the
share the links with the audience.
definitely.
Yes.
Oh, Tara, thank you so much. This has been
Thank you.
incredibly valuable. You give
Yes.
so much. Thank you so much. We're
Thank you. We're
hugely
so grateful for everything. Thank you.
And thank you for having me. Okay.